Zuri was a girl born with eyes that seemed to see more than most in her village. From a young age, she noticed the subtleties of life around her. The way the elders whispered secrets behind closed doors, the unfair distribution of food and resources, the silent fear in the eyes of other children when rules were bent to favor the influential. She lived in a village that prized obedience above curiosity, conformity above conscience, but Zuri's mind was restless. She questioned, she observed, and she wondered. Her family was loving but cautious, aware of the consequences for those who spoke too freely. They urged her to keep her thoughts to herself, to accept what was given, and to bow to the village's traditions without question. But Zuri could not. There was a fire in her, a sense of justice that refused to be silenced. Even small acts, like returning an unfairly taken portion of grain to a poorer neighbor, made her stand out among her peers. She did not do it for recognition, she did it because it felt right. Despite her courage, Zuri's life was not without hardship. She was smaller than the other girls, her frame fragile, and she often endured teasing and mockery. Yet her spirit was unbreakable. When she walked through the marketplace or the village square, she carried herself with a quiet confidence, her head held high, her gaze steady. People whispered about her, calling her stubborn or foolish, warning that one day her questioning would bring trouble. Still, she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Zuri also had a keen intelligence. She could notice things that escaped the attention of others. A missing tool here, a misaligned tile there, a whisper carried on the wind. She began to connect these small details into patterns, understanding that the village was not as orderly or fair as it appeared. The elders' punishments were arbitrary, their decisions self-serving, and the rules were designed to protect the powerful, not the people. Each discovery added to her growing resolve. She would not merely survive in silence. She would act, observe, and learn. Her bravery was evident in subtle ways at first. She helped children who had been punished unfairly, retrieved stolen possessions, and questioned decisions politely but firmly. Teachers and elders often scolded her, warning her to remain in her place. But Zuri learned to speak with precision, choosing words that could not easily be twisted or dismissed. Her courage was not reckless. It was deliberate, intelligent, and guided by the desire to seek truth. The villagers began to take notice. Some admired her quietly, though they dared not support her openly. Others viewed her as a threat, a disruption to the established order. Rumors spread that Zuri would one day challenge authority, that she would expose the hidden injustices of the village, and perhaps even overturn traditions that had gone unquestioned for generations. Yet for Zuri, the recognition was never the goal. She moved through her days observing, helping, and learning. Each instance of injustice, each whispered lie or hidden act of cruelty, became another piece in the puzzle she was slowly assembling. The fire of curiosity and courage within her continued to burn, fueled by the knowledge that the world could be better if one dared to stand against unfairness. By the time she reached her 16th year, Zuri had become known as the courageous girl, the one who saw, who questioned, and who did not bow in the face of oppression. Her quiet acts of bravery, her unrelenting observation, and her determination to act rightly had already begun to shake the foundations of the village, though few yet realized the magnitude of what she would uncover. Even beaten down by societal expectations, she was preparing, unknowingly, for the moment when standing up would change everything. In the corners of the marketplace and the shadows of the village huts, whispers of her name carried, spoken with a mixture of fear, admiration, and awe. Zuri had become a symbol, though not by design. She had learned that courage often begins quietly, with observation, patience, and a refusal to accept falsehoods. And though she did not yet know it, the trials ahead would test her in ways that would forever alter the course of her life, her village, and the very meaning of justice itself. The day came when Zuri could no longer remain silent. It was during the village gathering, a time when elders met to discuss decisions that affected everyone: who would receive land, how resources would be divided, and which families were favored. The same gathering where voices of dissent were quickly silenced, often with punishment or public shaming. That morning, Zuri noticed an injustice she could not ignore. A young boy, barely 10, had been accused of stealing a handful of grain. The elders, eager to assert authority and display power, sentenced him harshly, demanding that he work for days without pay and perform public labor as punishment. The boy's family was poor and the grains were needed to feed them. Zuri watched silently as the punishment was declared, but something inside her surged. She could not let fear or tradition dictate what was right. When the elders looked away for a moment, she stepped forward, her small frame tense but unwavering. "He did not steal," she said, her voice clear and firm. "The grains were misplaced. You know it. Punishing him only hides your mistakes and makes him suffer unfairly." The crowd murmured in surprise. Some shifted uneasily, others glanced at the elders with fear. Zuri's words had broken an unspoken rule, that no one, especially a girl, could openly challenge authority. The boy looked at her with wide eyes, hope flickering across his face for the first time since the elders began their scolding. The elders turned toward her, their faces hardening with anger. One man, a stern enforcer of tradition, pointed a shaking finger. "How dare you speak out of turn, girl? Do you think your voice can change the law?" Zuri did not flinch. She stood straight, her eyes meeting theirs with unshakable resolve. "The law is meant to protect, not punish the innocent," she replied. "If truth is ignored, what justice do we claim to serve?" Her defiance earned immediate consequences. She was struck across the shoulder with a rod, a warning to silence her. Pain shot through her body, but her spirit did not yield. The crowd gasped, some out of fear, others out of awe. The elders continued their punishment, but Zuri's words had already planted a seed of doubt, a flicker of recognition that injustice could be questioned. That night, bruised and sore, Zuri reflected on the event. Her first stand had cost her, but it had also revealed something important. Fear could be faced, authority could be challenged, and even one voice, small and seemingly powerless, could make a difference. She realized that courage was not about avoiding pain, but about speaking truth in the face of it. The village would not forget. Some whispered in fear about the audacity of the girl who had stood against the elders. Others quietly admired her bravery, seeing in her actions the potential for change that had been absent for generations. Zuri herself understood that this was only the beginning. The world had hidden layers, secrets that those in power sought to keep buried. And she would uncover them no matter the cost. Though beaten, Zuri's resolve grew stronger. She knew now that standing up would bring pain but also revelation. And she was ready to pay that price to uncover what lay hidden, truths that would shake not just her family but the entire village in ways no one could yet imagine. The morning after her first stand, Zuri woke with her body sore and bruised, but her mind sharper than ever. The beating she had received did not break her. It awakened something deeper within her, a resolve to see the truth no matter how deeply it was buried. She began observing the village with a new intensity, noticing things that previously might have gone unnoticed. As she walked through the market, her eyes caught subtle discrepancies. Barrels of grain, supposedly full, were slightly lighter than expected. Tools were not in their usual places. A few villagers glanced around nervously when she passed, as if afraid she could see what they had hidden. Each detail felt like a thread, leading to something larger, something the elders wanted kept secret. That night, she returned to the corner where she often sat alone, reflecting. It was there she noticed a faint glow under a loose floorboard near the hearth, a small reflection that seemed out of place. Curious, she moved closer, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted the board. Beneath it lay a folded piece of parchment, old and yellowed with age. The edges were frayed and the ink had faded, yet something about it pulsed with importance. Zuri's heart raced as she unfolded the parchment. It was a note, but not just any note. It was filled with cryptic markings, symbols, and a few words written clearly. "The truth lies beneath what is overlooked." Her pulse quickened. Could this be related to the injustices she had begun to see? She had always felt that the village was not as it appeared on the surface, but now she held the first tangible piece of proof. The note also contained hints of hidden spaces, obscure locations that the elders had always claimed were off-limits or dangerous. It seemed to guide her subtly, pointing toward a deeper secret buried within the village itself. Zuri realized that her nightly toil and her first stand were not isolated incidents. They were part of a larger puzzle, one that the elders had worked for years to conceal. Her mind raced, connecting the dots. Why had the elders punished the young boy so harshly? Why had they struck her when she merely spoke the truth? And now, why had this note been hidden in such a place as if waiting for someone to find it? Each question added weight to the realization that something significant was being kept from the villagers, something powerful enough that those in authority would use fear and violence to protect it. Zuri felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. The path ahead would be dangerous, but the clue gave her hope. She now had a starting point, a tangible lead that confirmed her suspicions. The village's surface of order and obedience masked hidden corruption, injustice, or betrayal. And she, small as she seemed, had the courage and intelligence to uncover it. That night, as she hid the note carefully beneath her mat, Zuri's thoughts swirled. The whispers she had heard in her dreams and the subtle signals she observed in the market now made sense. They were all pointing toward a hidden truth. Her first stand had earned her a beating, but it had also prepared her for this moment. The discovery of the first clue. She knew she could not rush. Each step had to be calculated, each observation carefully recorded. The elders' authority was strong, their reach far, and the consequences of being discovered could be severe. Yet Zuri also knew that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of it. With the hidden clue in her hands and the fire of determination in her heart, Zuri prepared for what lay ahead. The village, with all its rules and its hidden corruption, would soon reveal its secrets. And when it did, she would be ready, armed not with strength alone, but with wisdom, observation, and the courage to stand against the lies that had oppressed her people for far too long. The following evening, Zuri returned to the spot where she had discovered the hidden note, her heart pounding with anticipation. The parchment had been a revelation, but it also carried a warning. The path to truth would not be easy and danger could lurk behind every shadow. She knew she had to move carefully, observing every detail and remaining unseen. As she retraced the subtle hints from the note, she noticed patterns in the village she had previously ignored. Roof tiles that didn't quite match, footprints leading to walls that seemed solid, and discarded tools in strange locations. All small signs pointing toward a hidden passage. The village, orderly and routine by day, revealed a different face under the moonlight, one alive with secrets. Zuri followed the signs to a narrow alley behind the storage huts, where a thicket of vines had grown unchecked. The note had mentioned the path forgotten by all, and she realized this must be it. Pushing aside the tangled greenery, she discovered a small opening in the wall, cleverly concealed. It was just large enough for her to slip through, and a faint musty scent suggested it had not been used for many years. Inside, the air was cool and still, carrying an eerie quiet that amplified every small sound. The rustle of leaves, the scuttle of a mouse, her own heartbeat. The corridor was lined with rough-hewn stone, evidence of careful craftsmanship long forgotten. She noticed etchings on the walls, symbols matching those on the hidden note, faint but deliberate, leading her deeper into the passage. As she advanced, the path narrowed, forcing her to move slowly. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering from small cracks above. She realized this was not merely a physical path. It was a journey, a test of observation and patience. Each step demanded attention. A misstep could alert those who might be watching or worse, lead her into a trap the elders had prepared to protect their secrets. Halfway through, she found a small alcove containing a faded journal. The pages were brittle, yet the handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to one of the village elders long deceased. The entries spoke of hidden treasures, secret gatherings, and plans to manipulate village decisions for decades. Zuri's breath caught. The revelations confirmed her suspicions. Corruption and deceit had long been embedded in the village's foundations, and the injustices she had witnessed were only the surface. The secret path seemed to hum with energy, as if acknowledging her discovery. She felt a connection to those who had walked here before, both the conspirators and those who had tried to expose the truth. Their struggles resonated through the walls, urging her onward. This path was not just a corridor. It was a bridge between the village's hidden past and the justice that needed to be restored. Zuri paused to memorize every detail. The twists and turns, the symbols, the journal, the hidden alcoves. Each element was a clue, a piece of the puzzle she would need to confront the elders and bring the truth into the light. She knew that exposing the corruption would not be simple. The path she had discovered was dangerous, and the village's powerful figures would resist with all their might. Yet courage burned in her chest. This secret path, hidden beneath the layers of routine and obedience, had revealed the first concrete pieces of evidence. She was no longer a passive observer. With every careful step, Zuri embraced her role as the one who would uncover the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried or how much opposition she faced. As she emerged from the passage back into the quiet night, the stars above seemed brighter, the air filled with possibility. She knew that the secret path had given her more than evidence. It had given her direction, purpose, and the unwavering resolve to challenge the lies that had held her village captive for generations. After her journey along the secret path, Zuri felt a mix of excitement and caution. She had seen signs, symbols, and hints of hidden truths, but now she needed tangible evidence, something undeniable that could expose the corruption and injustices she had witnessed. The village elders had built their authority on secrecy, manipulation, and fear, and Zuri understood that words alone would not convince anyone. She needed proof. The journal she had found in the alcove provided the first solid lead. Its pages contained coded references to misappropriated resources, bribes, and secret meetings that influenced village decisions. Names were partially hidden with symbols, but Zuri's sharp observation skills allowed her to decode them. She realized that the same individuals who publicly proclaimed fairness and wisdom had quietly manipulated outcomes for decades. The thefts, punishments, and silenced voices she had seen were all connected to this network of deceit. Determined, she returned to the passage several nights in a row, uncovering more artifacts hidden in forgotten corners. Ledgers detailing stolen grains, bundles of letters exchanged between elders plotting to maintain control, and a small chest containing coins, jewelry, and gifts obtained through manipulation and fear. Each discovery confirmed the depth of the betrayal and the deliberate efforts to hide the truth from villagers. Zuri's heart pounded as she pieced everything together. The young boy punished unfairly had been a casualty of these long-standing schemes, and her own first stand had already rattled the fragile illusion of order. Now, with the evidence in her hands, she could connect the dots and reveal the full story. The village could no longer ignore what had been hidden for so long. Even as she gathered the materials, Zuri remained cautious. She understood that if the wrong person discovered her findings prematurely, the evidence could be destroyed, or worse, used against her. She hid the artifacts carefully, marking secret locations and memorizing every detail. The pieces fit together like a puzzle, forming a picture of systemic corruption, greed, and fear that had thrived beneath the village's polite surface. The young girl who had once been beaten for speaking out now held power in her hands, not through violence but through knowledge. She recognized that this evidence was not merely for confrontation. It was a tool to restore justice, give voice to the oppressed, and ensure that truth prevailed where deceit had ruled for generations. Zuri also realized the responsibility she now bore. The evidence was dangerous, powerful, and transformative. Revealing it would shake the village to its core, but the silence that had allowed corruption to flourish could no longer continue. Her courage and careful observation had brought her to this point, and she knew that the next steps would define not just her fate, but the future of her community. By the time dawn approached, she had secured every piece of evidence and planned the path forward. The hidden truths had been uncovered, and Zuri stood ready to confront the elders and the lies that had controlled her village. The first act of courage had led to discovery, and now, with proof in her hands, she was prepared to shake the foundations of the world that had once tried to silence her. That evening, Zuri prepared herself for the confrontation she knew was inevitable. She had gathered the evidence, memorized every detail, and carefully considered her words. But this confrontation would not happen in the village square, where the elders could rally supporters and intimidate her. No, she would confront them in secret, where their pretense of control could be challenged without interference. She waited until nightfall, when shadows stretched long across the village streets and the air grew thick with stillness. Slipping quietly past the watchful eyes of the few who lingered in the square, Zuri made her way to the elders' meeting hall, a building normally locked and heavily guarded. Her careful observations had revealed a hidden entrance at the rear, one long forgotten and overlooked. She slipped inside, her heartbeat echoing in the silent hall. Once inside, she laid out the evidence on a wooden table: ledgers, letters, and coins that proved the elders' misdeeds. The room, usually a place of power and secrecy, felt different now. The air seemed to thrum with the weight of truth, pressing against the walls where so many lies had been whispered and decisions made to oppress the vulnerable. The elders arrived one by one, expecting to meet an empty hall, but Zuri was already there, waiting. Their surprise quickly turned to tension as they saw the documents spread before her. "You think you can expose us?" one elder demanded, his voice trembling with both fear and anger. Zuri did not flinch. Instead, she spoke with calm authority, her voice steady and measured. "The truth has been hidden for too long. I have seen, observed, and collected what you tried to bury. Your actions have caused pain, fear, and silence. It ends tonight." The elders scoffed initially, attempting to intimidate her with their status and authority. But as she began presenting the evidence, piece by piece their confidence faltered. The ledger showing stolen grains, the letters plotting false accusations, the hidden coins, they could not deny what was laid before them. Each revelation struck with undeniable clarity, unraveling decades of carefully maintained deception. One by one their reactions shifted from anger to disbelief, then to fear. They realized that their power was built on fragile lies, easily dismantled by someone who had paid attention, who had noticed what others ignored. Zuri's courage, her careful observation, and her determination had given her the upper hand. The room, once a place of control and manipulation, now trembled with the weight of truth. Zuri looked each elder in the eye, not with hatred but with a quiet insistence. "You cannot unsee what has been uncovered. The village deserves honesty, and it begins with you confessing your actions." The elders, stripped of pretense, had no choice. One after another they admitted their wrongdoings, stammering apologies that could never fully erase the harm they had caused, but which marked the beginning of accountability. By the end of the night, Zuri had transformed the hall from a chamber of fear into a place of reckoning. The confrontation, carefully planned and executed, proved that courage and wisdom could overturn years of oppression. She had not used threats, violence, or intimidation, only truth, patience, and clarity. As she left the hall and stepped into the quiet night, Zuri felt the first real sense of hope she had ever known. The elders' secrets were laid bare, and the village, once under the shadow of deception, now had a chance to heal. Her stand, once punished with blows, had now led to the revelation that would shake them all, and it was only the beginning. By dawn, word of Zuri's confrontation had spread throughout the village, carried quietly at first by whispers among early risers, then more boldly as villagers gathered near the square. The revelations she had uncovered could no longer be contained, and the air buzzed with a mixture of fear, anger, and anticipation. People spoke in hushed tones about the elders' hidden crimes, the stolen resources, and the lies that had ruled their lives for generations. Some villagers were stunned, unable to believe that those they had trusted and revered for decades had acted so selfishly and deceitfully. Others, however, felt vindicated, recognizing injustices they had suspected but never dared to confront. Mothers remembered the children unfairly punished, merchants recalled goods mysteriously missing, and farmers thought of harvests that had been mysteriously misappropriated. Zuri's evidence tied all these threads together, giving clarity to what had long been whispered in fear. As the sun rose, the village square filled with people. The elders, now aware that their secrets had been revealed, emerged reluctantly, their faces pale and tense. They tried to speak, to control the narrative, but the villagers would not listen. Zuri, standing firmly with the evidence she had painstakingly collected, addressed the crowd. Her voice carried authority, yet there was no anger in it, only the undeniable weight of truth. She explained what had been uncovered, detailing the letters, ledgers, and hidden treasures that exposed the web of deceit. The crowd listened, eyes widening as each revelation unfolded. Gasps, murmurs, and exclamations echoed across the square. Those who had once been oppressed, silenced, or ignored now felt a surge of validation. They began to question every command, every unjust decision, and every word previously spoken by the elders. For the first time, the village saw the truth of what had been done in the shadows, and the authority of the elders crumbled under the weight of evidence. Some villagers confronted the elders directly, demanding explanations and accountability. Others comforted each other, recognizing that they were no longer alone in their grievances. Even those who had been complicit in minor acts of deceit stepped forward, offering confessions or apologies, acknowledging that the truth could no longer be hidden. Zuri, though central to this upheaval, remained humble, guiding the villagers to focus on justice and healing rather than revenge. By midday, the atmosphere shifted from shock to determination. The village elders, once untouchable, were now subject to scrutiny and the rule of truth. Plans began to form for restitution. Stolen goods would be returned, false accusations corrected, and promises made to ensure fairness in the future. The people's respect for Zuri grew, not because she wielded power over them, but because she had uncovered what they had long needed to see. Through it all, Zuri realized that the reaction of the village was more than a response to her courage. It was a transformation of the community itself. For the first time, they faced their history honestly, acknowledged past mistakes, and embraced the possibility of rebuilding on a foundation of truth. The elders, once pillars of authority and unchallenged power, now faced the consequences of decades of deceit. With the village fully aware of their actions, the stage was set for a reckoning that could not be ignored. Zuri, having guided the revelation of truth, watched as the community determined how justice would unfold. She knew this was not about vengeance but about restoring balance, accountability, and respect for what had been wronged. The village council convened in the open square, a symbolic choice that emphasized transparency. No walls, no hidden chambers, only the sun and the eyes of the people. The elders, pale and trembling, were brought before those they had wronged. They attempted to plead ignorance, to downplay their actions, but the evidence Zuri had unearthed was irrefutable. Each ledger, each letter, each hidden item testified to their long-standing manipulation and abuse of trust. Zuri stood beside the villagers, her presence both reassuring and commanding. "You cannot undo the past," she said softly but firmly, "but you can accept responsibility and begin to set things right." Her words, measured and clear, resonated through the square. The elders, for the first time, could not hide behind fear or tradition. They had relied on silence, secrecy, and authority to protect themselves, but now those tools had been stripped away. The people spoke, recounting personal experiences of injustice. Farmers described harvests stolen or misallocated. Children and young adults shared stories of punishment and humiliation for minor offenses. Merchants and artisans revealed the subtle ways they had been deceived or coerced. Each testimony added weight to the evidence, and the elders could no longer resist the undeniable truth of their wrongdoing. Some elders wept openly, finally confronted with the human cost of their actions. Others attempted to justify themselves, claiming intentions to maintain order or protect the village, but the collective voice of the people was unwavering. The reckoning was not merely about punishment, it was about recognition of harm and commitment to make amends. Zuri guided the proceedings, ensuring that the process remained fair and that anger did not turn to cruelty. Restitution became the first step. Stolen goods were returned to rightful owners, apologies were formally acknowledged, and promises were made to reform the practices that had enabled deception. The elders were given responsibilities that emphasized transparency and accountability, making them active participants in repairing the damage they had caused. The village, under Zuri's guidance, created systems to prevent future abuses of power, ensuring that no individual or group could manipulate trust with impunity. As the day wore on, the atmosphere shifted from confrontation to cautious hope. The elders, humbled and exposed, began to comprehend the depth of their failures. The villagers, emboldened by the exposure of truth, felt a newfound sense of empowerment. And Zuri, standing at the center of it all, understood that the reckoning was not just for the elders. It was for the community, for justice, and for the restoration of balance that had long been disrupted. By evening, the square was quiet but transformed. The reckoning had shaken the foundations of the village, but it had also opened the path for healing, fairness, and renewed respect. Zuri, once beaten and silenced, had turned courage and observation into a force that reshaped her entire world. After the elders' reckoning, Zuri's attention turned to the final piece of the puzzle, the hidden treasure she had discovered hints of during her investigation. While confronting the elders had brought justice, there remained one secret they had tried to bury for generations. A chest containing wealth, letters, and artifacts that revealed the full extent of their deceit. The treasure was concealed beneath the floorboards of the council hall, hidden under layers of dust, old rugs, and wooden panels. Zuri had noticed subtle irregularities during her first visit. Slight gaps in the wood, faint scratches that suggested repeated handling, and whispers of the wind that seemed to carry secrets. Guided by patience and careful observation, she returned with tools, courage, and the permission of the village to uncover what lay beneath. With the villagers gathered outside, Zuri removed the floorboards, revealing a small ancient chest. It was heavy, ornately carved, and sealed with a rusted lock that seemed to resist time itself. As she opened it, the contents spilled into the light. Stacks of gold coins, carefully folded letters, and documents detailing bribes, fraudulent deals, and secret arrangements designed to enrich the elders while oppressing the village. The treasure was more than wealth. It was proof, tangible and undeniable, of decades of betrayal. The villagers gasped, their murmurs filling the hall. They had suspected wrongdoing, but the physical evidence laid bare before them confirmed the depth and scale of the deception. The gold and artifacts symbolized not just material loss, but years of manipulated trust, hidden injustices, and silenced voices. Zuri held up a letter, reading aloud a particularly damning account of an elder's attempt to falsely accuse a villager to seize land. Every word echoed through the hall, leaving no room for denial. Yet Zuri did not let greed or vengeance guide her. She carefully explained that the treasure should not remain with a single individual or group. Instead, it would be used to restore fairness in the village, repairing homes, aiding those who had suffered, and funding communal projects that had long been neglected. She emphasized that the real value of the treasure was not in its gold, but in the truth it revealed and the opportunity it presented for justice and healing. The elders, now stripped of authority and facing public scrutiny, could only watch as the treasure became a tool of restitution. The villagers, once silent and oppressed, were now empowered, their voices amplified by the tangible proof of what had been done to them. Zuri's cleverness, courage, and unwavering commitment to uncovering the hidden truth had transformed the treasure from a symbol of greed into a catalyst for collective restoration. By the end of the day, the chest was emptied, its contents distributed according to justice and necessity. The hidden treasure had shaken the elders, emboldened the villagers, and solidified Zuri's role as a leader who not only exposed wrongdoing but ensured that the aftermath brought fairness and dignity back to the community. Months after the revelations and the uncovering of the hidden treasure, the village was no longer the same. Where once there had been fear, silence, and whispered doubts, now stood openness, accountability, and collective pride. Zuri's courage and persistence had become the turning point, and the changes she sparked touched every corner of the community. The first and most visible transformation was in the leadership. The elders who had once ruled unchecked were either removed from power or placed under strict oversight. Their actions were monitored by councils composed of villagers from all walks of life, ensuring that no single person could manipulate decisions again. Justice had become participatory, with the people actively involved in the governance of their community. Decisions that affected everyone were now made openly, with transparency replacing secrecy. Economically, the treasure that had been hidden for generations was carefully redistributed. Homes that had fallen into disrepair were restored, communal granaries filled, and projects long neglected, like irrigation systems, schools, and marketplaces, were revitalized. Farmers whose lands had been taken or manipulated found restitution, merchants who had been defrauded received support, and children finally had access to education that had been denied to previous generations. The village prospered, but prosperity now came with fairness and integrity. The social fabric of the village also changed. Villagers who had been silenced or marginalized now felt empowered to speak. Mothers taught their daughters and fathers encouraged their sons to value honesty, observation, and courage. Zuri's story became a daily lesson. Standing up, asking questions, and seeking truth were now celebrated virtues. Festivals, once merely a display of wealth and tradition, now included ceremonies honoring bravery, justice, and communal responsibility. Spiritually, the village sensed a shift as well. Where tension and fear had once lingered, there was now a sense of balance and harmony. Elders who had previously relied on fear found that their authority was now based on wisdom and service rather than intimidation. The community felt the presence of ancestral guidance more keenly, acknowledging that respect and honesty were the true sources of strength. For Zuri, the transformation was personal as well. She became a respected figure not for her defiance, but for her insight, courage, and fairness. People sought her advice on difficult matters, and she guided them with patience, always emphasizing that vigilance and truth were continuous responsibilities, not one-time actions. Her life became a living example of the power of standing up, even when the odds were against her, and the village's transformation was inseparable from her influence. By the evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the village square no longer echoed with whispers of fear. It rang with laughter, music, and conversation. The once hidden injustices were now lessons etched in every home, every field, and every heart. Children ran freely without fear, and elders spoke openly without concern of hidden reprisals. Zuri walked among them, her presence quiet but commanding, knowing that the ripple of her courage had permanently reshaped her world. In the months and years that followed, visitors from other villages came to witness the transformation. They marveled at the fairness, the justice, and the empowered community. Zuri's story, once just a personal struggle against oppression, became a symbol that truth, courage, and perseverance could reshape entire communities. The village had not just uncovered a hidden treasure, they had uncovered a hidden potential within themselves, one that would continue to flourish for generations to come. Word of Zuri's bravery and the transformation of her village began to spread beyond the hills, carried by travelers, merchants, and visiting neighbors. Stories of how one young woman uncovered hidden crimes, restored justice, and redistributed a long-concealed treasure reached nearby villages, stirring curiosity and admiration. What had started as a personal fight for truth had become a beacon of courage for entire communities. Other villages, long accustomed to silence in the face of corruption and oppression, began to question their own elders and leaders. Mothers whispered Zuri's name to their daughters, teaching them that courage was not an act of rebellion but an act of wisdom and responsibility. Fathers spoke of her patience and cleverness, showing sons that vigilance and observation were essential tools for justice. The ripple of her actions spread quietly, yet powerfully through conversations, visits, and trade routes. Travelers who witnessed the transformed village firsthand carried back not just tales but practical lessons. They described how accountability councils had replaced unchecked authority, how hidden treasures were used to repair injustice, and how communal decision-making had restored fairness. Inspired, neighboring villages began to implement similar measures, fostering dialogue, transparency, and shared responsibility. Zuri's influence was no longer confined to the boundaries of her home. It had become a model for social renewal across the region. The ripple was also emotional and spiritual. Villagers who had once lived in fear of silence now felt empowered to speak and act with integrity. Young women in particular found strength in Zuri's story. They began to record injustices, speak up against wrongdoing, and advocate for fairness in their homes and communities. Men who had relied on intimidation learned that respect earned through honesty and service carried far greater influence than fear ever could. Zuri herself continued to guide her village, but she encouraged autonomy and initiative, understanding that the most enduring change comes when people internalize lessons rather than wait for a single leader to act. She shared her wisdom openly, demonstrating that courage was not just about confronting wrongdoing but about fostering understanding, fairness, and community resilience. Her name became synonymous with integrity, cleverness, and moral strength. Even years later, storytellers and elders referenced Zuri's actions during festivals, market days, and communal gatherings. They recounted how a single act of observation and bravery had not only exposed wrongdoing but had led to the recovery of hidden treasures, the restoration of justice, and the empowerment of an entire village. Children learned that courage was contagious and that standing up for truth had consequences far beyond personal recognition. Through these stories, the ripple of courage continued to flow, crossing boundaries of time and geography. Zuri's actions had transformed more than her village. They had ignited a movement of moral accountability and empowered voices throughout the region. The lesson was clear. One determined individual, guided by wisdom and bravery, could set in motion a chain of events that reshaped entire communities. The ripple of courage, once started, could not be stopped. Years passed, but the story of Zuri did not fade. Mothers told it to their daughters at night, grandfathers recounted it to grandchildren by the fireside, and travelers carried it from village to village. The tale of a young woman who stood against deception, uncovered hidden crimes, and restored justice became a legend, woven into the cultural fabric of the region. Her name was spoken with reverence, her courage celebrated as a guiding light for all who faced oppression or wrongdoing. The village where it all began thrived as a symbol of integrity and vigilance. The council systems Zuri had inspired remained in place, and the treasures she had uncovered were preserved, not as mere wealth, but as reminders of what truth and diligence could achieve. Walls once lined with fear now resonated with the laughter and voices of a community that had learned to speak openly and act collectively. Zuri herself became a figure of myth, her deeds larger than life, her cleverness and patience immortalized in story and song. In other villages, the ripple of courage Zuri had initiated continued to expand. Communities implemented similar practices of transparency, fairness, and accountability. People began to see that hidden injustice could be confronted without fear, and that careful observation, patience, and wisdom were as powerful as any force of oppression. Zuri's legend encouraged ordinary villagers to recognize their own power to challenge lies, corruption, and abuse. The story of Zuri was passed down with specific lessons. Children learned that truth might be hidden, that silence could be broken, and that courage often comes disguised as careful observation and thoughtfulness. The hidden treasures she uncovered became symbolic artifacts in storytelling, representing not wealth, but the power of knowledge and the importance of vigilance. Parents taught that vigilance, perseverance, and moral courage were far more valuable than gold or status. Even the natural world seemed to echo the legend. Elders would speak of winds that whispered Zuri's name through the trees, rivers that seemed to shimmer brighter when justice was done, and shadows that shifted to reveal hidden paths, as if the land itself honored the bravery of one determined girl. Her legacy transcended generations, inspiring not only action but reverence for truth, fairness, and courage. Travelers who encountered villages influenced by Zuri would often remark on the similarity. Women and men spoke freely, young people challenged unfairness with wisdom, and communities upheld values that had once been ignored or suppressed. Zuri's story became a model for leadership, resilience, and ethical conduct, reminding all who heard it that courage, when paired with intelligence and persistence, could ignite change that outlived a lifetime. In time, Zuri's legend became more than a story. It became a guiding principle. Parents would say, "Remember Zuri when you feel afraid, when injustice seems too great, and when silence tempts you. Observe, think, act, and the truth will follow." Her voice, though she had lived centuries before in real time, resonated in every courageous act that her tale inspired. The village she saved and transformed became a beacon of integrity, and her legend spread like the morning sun across hills, rivers, and valleys. Generations later, when girls and boys stepped into positions of responsibility or faced challenges of morality, they would recall Zuri's journey. They learned that standing up, even when beaten down, even when silenced, could uncover truths so powerful that entire communities would be reshaped. And so her story endured, etched into memory, culture, and the hearts of those who understood that one brave voice, guided by wisdom, could never truly be stopped.